Think of our sisters serving still, with towel and basin, cup and bread, tending earth's needs with patient care, till hurts are healed and hunger sped. Faith of our sisters, art and skill, loving with heart and mind and will.
Once upon a time, many, many years ago, there was a woman named Jeanne-Françoise Frémaux, now known as the foundress of the Visitation Order, Saint Jane de Chantal. She was born on January 28, 1572, in Dijon, France. Growing up, she was a lively, intelligent child. When little Jane was only 18 months old, her mother passed away, so Jane never had the chance to know her mother. Jane's father was not all that she had. Throughout her life, Jane was a wife, mother, and nun. Her life's work marks the birth of the Visitation Order. At age 20, Jane married Baron de Chantal. They had 6 children, 2 of whom died in infancy. Jane was always very engaged in charitable works. She persuaded her husband to have daily mass in their household. She also made soup for those who were less fortunate and cared for many people who were sick and aged. Unexpectedly, her husband was killed after 9 years of marriage. She was left a single mother caring for 4 children. She was anxious to know God's will, and she hoped and prayed that spiritual direction would be given to her. When Jane was only 32 years old, she met St. Francis de Sales, and he became her spiritual director. Francis informed Jane of his plans to found a safe place where women would devote their lives to the corporal works of mercy. They intended to live out the virtues of the Holy Mary. On June 6, 1610, Jane, Francis, and 2 other women opened the first convent called the Order of the Visitation of Holy Mary. Jane helped establish 81 more convents in her lifetime. The Visitation Sisters cherish the works and wisdom of Saint Jane de Chantal. At Viz, the little virtues that Saint Jane personified are lived out each year. The works of Saint Jane were undeniably lived by the sisters who called Visitation home, and they continue to permeate our classrooms, hallways, and the monastery chapel today.
Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Margaret, who showed a great love for the Eucharist. Her early childhood was full of hardship, which she rose up against with the help of God. Around the age of 10, she developed rheumatic fever and was forced to stay bedridden for almost 5 years. This period ended when she made a vow to the Virgin Mary, promising to consecrate herself to religious life, and was miraculously restored to health. To recognize this favor and honor the Blessed Virgin, she added the name Mary to her baptismal name, becoming Margaret Mary. When Margaret Mary was 20, she began seeing visions of Jesus Christ. One of these visions re-inspired her to join religious life, and she entered the Visitation Convent at Paris-le-Monial when she was 24. In 1673, Margaret Mary began receiving a series of revelations from Jesus Christ, in which she learned that she was his chosen instrument to spread devotions to his Sacred Heart among Christians. Christ asked Margaret Mary to establish the Feast of Sacred Heart and instructed her in a new devotion known as the First Fridays and the Holy Hour. Hoping to share Christ's message, Margaret Mary tried to tell others about the revelations, but she was scorned by her own sisters and superior Mother de Saumaise. Many theologians dismissed her revelation as insanity, and she was treated cruelly by her community. Despite this, Margaret Mary persisted and continued to spread the message of the Sacred Heart. Eventually, the validity of her revelation was recognized by Blaise Claudel de Colimbre, a Jesuit priest and writer. In 1681, Margaret Mary was appointed novice mistress by the new superior, Mother Melin, but was still held in contempt by many. The hostility toward Margaret Mary continued until 1683, after Claudel de la Colimbre's death, when his written accounts of her revelations were read aloud. As novice mistress, Margaret Mary saw her convent observe the Feast of the Sacred Heart privately beginning in 1686. 2 years later, a chapel to honor the Sacred Heart was built at Paray-le-Monial, and observations of the Feast of the Sacred Heart spread to other visitation convents. Margaret Mary died on October 17, 1690, at Paray-le-Monial, and 75 years after her death, in 1765, the devotion of the Sacred Heart was officially recognized by Pope Clement XIII. In 1920, Margaret Mary was canonized as a saint and became known as one of the saints of the Sacred Heart. Here at Visitation School, she is celebrated by handing out M&Ms on her feast day, October 16th.
Once upon a time, there were 6 brave Visitation Sisters from St. Louis, Missouri. Their names were Mother Agatha, Sister Alphonsa, Sister Magdalene, Sister Mary Claire, Sister Martina, and Sister Clementine. They had devoted their lives to God as professed sisters of the Visitation. They were called upon to start a school for girls by a group of prominent St. Paulites who invited them to travel to St. Paul, Minnesota, and start a foundation. Not only was a group of women enduring a voyage up the Mississippi River in a steamboat a radical idea, but the idea of creating an all-girls school was rather unusual as well. After their long voyage, they arrived in Minnesota. Upon exiting the steamship, they were asked to ride in a carriage and drive to the residence of Bishop Grace, report their arrival, and get a blessing from him. Following that, they drove to Mr. Prince's house, a generous benefactor, and all around the city until they were brought to their new home on Somerset Street. They established a new convent at the Somerset Street house, where they planted the roots of their all-girls school. In September, the school opened with 27 students enrolled. Some were day students and some boarders. The sisters were responsible for all aspects of their own lives and the lives of their students, which included acting as teachers, dining managers, and devoted religious leaders. Although leaving their home on an extended journey wasn't easy, nor was settling in a strange place, kind people always surrounded and welcomed them, just like Visitation does today. This kindness is known as Salesian spirituality, and the legacy of the sisters' love and respect remains in the halls of Visitation today.
Once, there was a young Irish girl who lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. Her name was Margaret Cullinan. She was one of 4 children. Tragically, little Margaret's mother died when she and her siblings were all very young. Her father knew just what to do. He sent for his sister, Ellen, to take care of the children and run the household. Aunt Ellen provided a loving, traditional, and Catholic faith-filled life for the Cullinan family, so much so that 3 of the 4 siblings received God's call to join religious life. Margaret entered the Visitation Convent and Sisterhood in 1912. She was given the name Sister Jane Margaret Cullinan. Just 2 years later, Sister Jane Margaret's younger sister, Anne, also joined the Visitation Order and was given the name Sister Mary Rita. This sister duo was unstoppable, working strongly and fairly together as directress and procuratrix of the school and convent. Incredibly, Jane Margaret and Mary Rita each gave over 60 years of their lives to teaching, mentoring, and caring for the Visitation Sisters and the many students whose journeys intersected theirs. Sister Jane Margaret shared many gifts with Visitation: her quirky yet effective interpretation of pedagogy, her fantastic knack for quilting, her impeccable organizational skills, her love of gardening, her strong yet gentle spiritual mentorship, and guiding leadership. She was an educator for over 50 years, serving as head of school during 21 of those. Eventually, Sister Jane Margaret became Mother Superior, and it was under her leadership that the 90 acres of property known today as Visitation School in Mendota Heights was purchased. Sister Jane Margaret passed away at 91 years of age, but her important decision to acquire land to expand and enhance the education Visitation provides can never be forgotten. We, the teachers and students at Visitation School, are the living heritage and dream of the Visitation Sisters.
Once upon a time, there was a courageous handywoman who didn't waste a single thing. Her name was Angela Diffley, and she lived in a small bedroom at the Visitation Convent. She grew up on a farm and knew intuitively how to tend the land. She brought her farming spirit and experience to the Visitation Sisterhood. She loved to fix things and care for the earth, so taking on the role procuratrix for Visitation School and Convent was a natural fit for Sister Mary Angela. She always carried a heavy tool belt under her habit and worked tirelessly behind the scenes each day at school. Everyone went to her when they needed something fixed. Sister Mary Angela decided to contribute even more to the community. She received her boiler's license in order to take better care of the school's heating needs through the long Minnesota winters. Because of Sister Mary Angela's remarkable expertise and fix-it attitude, the Visitation Sisters rarely needed to hire anyone from the outside to fix mechanical problems. Sister Mary Angela interpreted her vow of poverty taken at profession to mean waste not, want not, and threw nothing away. When moving from Fairmont Avenue in St. Paul to Mendota Heights, Sister Mary Angela was the last to leave. Sister Mary Angela felt the need to take every light bulb and every other spare part with her to reuse and repurpose in the sisters' and students' new home. Sister Mary Angela was also very generous. Noticing that a large portion of the sisters' land was underutilized, she offered it to a local Hmong family who still farms it today. In 1993, Sister Angela had a stroke and was admitted to the hospital. Sure enough, even then, she was wearing her trusty tool belt. She passed away soon after, but Sister Mary Angela's hard-working spirit and watchful care of Mother Earth still blesses the 90 acres of land we set foot on each and every school day.
I offer
Once upon a time, there was a fearless cowgirl who lived on the windy plains of North Dakota, surrounded by nature and animals. Her name was Eleanor McCabe. When Eleanor was little, she lived on a farm, corralling cows and roaming the countryside. As much as the life of a cowgirl suited Eleanor, she knew that God had greater plans for her elsewhere. Eleanor boarded a train in Minnesota and began her studies at the convent of the Visitation for high school. Towards her final years as a student at Visitation, Eleanor felt God's call to join the monastery as a sister. She entered the Sisterhood when she was 20 years old, taking the name Sister Mary Regina. She wanted to change the lives of hundreds of female students by giving them one of the greatest gifts in the world, an education. During her time teaching at Visitation, Sister introduced students to the world of literature, guiding her classes through numerous classical plays and novels. Sister also taught her students how to write, a skill that they would take with them through the rest of their lives. Sister became the Mother Superior of the St. Paul Monastery as they transitioned to their new home in Mendota Heights in 1966. At the same period of time, she served as the head of the entire Visitation Second Federation, contributing to different visitation monasteries in the United States. Sister Mary Regina was respected by others and handled her various jobs with grace and humility. Outside of teaching, Sister Mary Regina shared her gifts of caring for animals with Visitation. Sister brought the legacy of animal life to the school in the form of goats, dogs, and birds, as well as the unique and majestic peacocks that continue to live at Visitation today. Sister Mary Regina cared for each critter at Visitation with the love that she had developed for animals as a child on the farm. Although God called Sister Mary Regina to heaven in 2004, her legacy continues to impact Visitation visually as the peacocks became a special symbol of the school, but also the lesson that she left behind for generations of students to come, the importance of caring for each and every living being as one of God's creatures.
Once there was a girl that never doubted who she truly was. This girl was Laurie Thibert, later known as Sister Perron Marie. Met with many fears and obstacles in her early life, Laurie's worst fear was that she would never be normal. After a life-changing surgery, she had to adapt to a new way of life and accept herself in the process despite her changed physical appearance. This major change caused an inner voice to surface, a constant noiseless voice that wouldn't go away. Despite the constant feeling of needing to be close to God, she pushed it aside and continued on with her life. She went to Emmanuel College in Boston, Massachusetts, and then on to graduate school for English at Marquette University. After earning a master's degree in English, she was ready to become a teacher. Miraculously, Laurie's dream would soon become true when Father Gabriel, a friend of the sisters at the Convent of Visitation, suggested that she visit the sisters in St. Paul. Laurie took his advice, and when she arrived, she felt a sense of belonging and peace. Because of the belonging Laurie felt, she chose to join the Visitation Sisterhood and finally live out the vocation she knew she had been called to, demonstrating her undying devotion to God. During her time at Visitation, Sister Perron Marie gave beautifully of herself by writing poetry, teaching the French language, and translating the important Salesian prayers and works of St. Francis de Sales and St. Jane de Chantal from French to English. Doing all of this with a direct yet gentle manner, Sister Perron Marie is a legacy of Visitation, especially for the World Languages and Cultures Department. She passed to God on September 12, 2013, but is always remembered for the remarkable impact she had on the community, her students, and the Visitation Sisterhood.
Once upon a time, there's a fairy tale family who lived in a large Virginia home with music and laughter. In this family, the mother had a gentle, caring spirit, while the father was stern and strong in his faith. The youngest of their 7 children, Edna Rose, or Eddie, paved her own path by attending the Cardome Visitation Boarding School, where she fell in love with the sisters' community. A few years on, she entered the Cardome, Kentucky convent, where she began her new life in the Sisterhood. Eddie was now Sister Marie Therese, and during this time, Sister relied on her prayer life to find peace. She was asked to move to the St. Paul Visitation in order to follow her passion as an English teacher. While in St. Paul, she took on the role of Mother Superior for 6 years, overlooking all the activity in the convents. She later became Dean of Students, earning the nickname Sister Honey. Sister's leadership was one of gentle persuasion, and the students had no interest in disrespecting or lying to such a kind soul. She also brought her love of music and the violin to Visitation. She loved nothing more than playing her violin with the students of the orchestra. During the spring musicals, students recount that the sister would often get distracted by actors on stage and simply stop playing to marvel from her seat. Sister Marie Therese captured countless hearts of students during her time at Visitation.
Such a simple song. This is where I belong. Just the sound of your voice, the light in your eyes. We're so far away from yesterday together. With a wink and a smile. We go together like a wink and a smile.
Once upon a time, there were 4 women. These 4 women wanted to expand their visitation charism to the poor. Their names were Sister Mary Margaret Mackenzie, Sister Karen Mohan, Sister Mary Frances Reese, and Sister Mary Virginia Smith. These 4 sisters led the convent and the Visitation to extend their ministry to disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. These sisters visited 3 different places: Frogtown in St. Paul, the Phillips and Near North neighborhoods in Minneapolis, in order to find their new home. The sisters had a little trouble deciding where to land, but eventually decided on North Minneapolis. After they found a home in Fremont, moved in and got settled, they began sharing their message. After 1 year, the Sisterhood welcomed their first new member, Susan Homer, and the community started to grow. The sisters decided they should expand their monastery further, so they began their search for another house. They finally found the perfect house and called it the Girard House. They referred to this addition as 2 houses, but 1 monastery. After this, Sisters Teresa Miller, Joanna O'Mara, Catherine Mullen, and Brenda Leesenby came to join. These sisters continue to work hard to keep their community and improve it. Whenever they have faced a challenge, they have overcome it in the name of God. They help their neighbors by simply being a kind and gentle presence. They even help small children with their schoolwork. The sisters spend their time living out the little Salesian virtues with and for their neighbors. Indeed, they can be seen doing small acts with great love in their community. They also have a big communal gathering where they sing songs and share meals. This helps to bring the community together and to live Jesus. The sisters like to think of this neighborhood as their monastic garden that they take care of with gentle strength and are steadily present in the lives of those who live there. Their goal is to be a prayerful presence. They often say, being present means respecting each moment for what it has to offer. It means celebrating the joy of Jesus in all people, no matter how broken their bodies or spirits. It means taking the time to smile and greet neighbors on the street, and to welcome and befriend strangers. Even though the sisters are aging, they remain vibrant, and the community continues to thrive with plans to expand their ministry with a newly constructed monastery for the Visitation North Minneapolis Monastery.
Don't give up hope.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
Don't you give up.
Don't you give up.
Keep moving on.
Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love.
Lift up your eyes.
Lift up your eyes.
Don't you despair.
Don't you despair.
Look up ahead.
Look up ahead.
The path is there.
The path is there. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love. How do you say to a child in the night, nothing's alright, but then nothing's alright? How do you say?
There once was a girl named Margaret Vayum. She grew up with her family in St. Paul and was known by her friends as caring, patient, practical, and steady, and someone who loved everything nature had to offer. Margaret followed God's special plan for her, to live a life immersed in the Salesian virtues from St. Francis de Sales, to live in the present moment. Margaret decided to join the Visitation Sisterhood after an encounter with the statue of the Virgin Mary. After entering the Visitation Convent, Margaret became Sister Mary Denise. She adjusted to the new ways of life, including a new wardrobe and living in a cloistered community. Although she never questioned her call, she had to face and overcome obstacles in her life. In her third year at the convent, Sister experienced the unexpected death of her father and also the loss of her brother. She took these struggles on with the help of God's love and continued to focus on the present. Sister Mary Denise always listened to the voice of God and tackled her obstacles in life with an open heart, guided by God's plan for her. Sister Mary Denise spent many years of visitation, first as a student, then as a professed sister, teacher, and administrator. One of her biggest contributions to visitation was to steward the Montessori program in the lower school. The program emphasizes that children are valued as unique individuals who can flourish in their learning with guided independence by the teacher. She also served multiple terms as Mother Superior. Outside of her school monastic responsibilities, she enjoyed making the famous Visitation caramels. This time allowed her to build relationships with the greater Visitation community. She lived life of visitation surrounded by old and new friends, alumni, and colleagues. Sister Mary Denise's constant presence at school masses, prayer services, and the heartfelt presentation of the Bible to the freshmen each year all show the little virtues she lives out every day in the Visitation community. The Visitation Convent may have closed its doors for good, but Sister Mary Denise's presence and essence in the community will never be forgotten. She lives on through the legacy of the Sisterhood and the Salesian virtues they have given to all of us at Visitation School.
Once upon a time,
there was a girl who was strong in faith and Salesian virtues. Her name was Catherine Ann. She was born in 1930 and grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. She was the youngest child in her family. She spent her time whiling away the hours playing with her siblings and neighborhood friends. For her high school education, Catherine decided to attend Visitation School, following in the steps of her older sisters. When Catherine attended Viz, she immediately felt welcomed and cared for. This was especially important during her father's tragic death from cancer. Her relationship with her mother became challenging, yet her trust in God and the strong Visitation Sisterhood helped her persevere through this difficult time. She graduated from Viz and was led to attend Trinity College. Catherine began to wonder what God's plan for her was, and if it involved a religious vocation. She desired to share her life with others, so she decided to join the Visitation Sisterhood in St. Paul. She was given the name Sister Mary Paul, but when Vatican II later allowed her to do so, she changed it to the more feminine Mary Paula. During her transition into sisterhood, she continued to trust that God knew what was best, even though sometimes she felt out of place. Sister Mary Paula took her vows, even though it was a challenging commitment, and found joy in her profession. She taught many different subjects at Visitation, and she enjoyed her students. Sister Mary Paula continues to have a strong presence and model of intellect, spirituality, and optimism. Her love of Salesian virtues led her to help create Vistory, a trip where students interact with other visitation schools in the country, engaging in service projects with them. She uses her gifts to express her vocation in everything that she does, especially involving visitation students. Every student that has attended Viz in recent years has looked forward to seeing Sister Mary Paula making popcorn and selling cookies after school with the lower school children. When it came time for the Mendota Heights Convent to close, Sister Mary Paula joined the Visitation North Minneapolis Monastery. While once she enjoyed making popcorn and cookies for the visitation students, she now helps hand out popsicles to the children who visit the North Minneapolis neighborhood.
Once upon a time, a quiet and timid girl named Kathleen Keefe was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Kathleen had a lovely childhood and spent a lot of time playing with the neighborhood children. Her relationship with her mother was strained. When Kathleen was criticized by her mother, she found sanctuary in her paternal grandmother. Grandmother Keefe was very sensitive to the child's feelings and continued to have a connection with her throughout her life. Kathleen had a strong spiritual experience when she was 9. She had just finished playing with the neighborhood children one night, and she lay down on the soft grass to take a moment to herself. When looking up to the stars, she felt God's presence strongly and realized that there was something in the universe that was bigger than she. This experience has stuck with her throughout her life. When she was of age to attend high school, she very much wanted to go to Holy Angels, an all-girls school in Richfield. Her mother, on the other hand, wanted her to attend Visitation Convent School in St. Paul. Despite her opposition to her mother, there seemed to be something that melted her heart at Visitation, and she decided to give in and attend, which she credits to God. Kathleen felt that the school could become her second home. After attending college for a year, she realized that God was calling her and decided to enter the Visitation Convent at age 20 and became Sister Bridget Marie. She studied at St. Catherine's to become a teacher and officially became a professed nun in 1967. Sister Bridget Marie enrolled in a graduate program at St. John's University, studying theology. While working in Visitation, she was a lower school teacher. Eventually, she chose to spread the message of God's love as a spiritual director working one-on-one with people, bringing her wisdom and enlightenment in this ministry.
Today